101.5 FM proudly presents The Community Kitchen with Annette Long.
And welcome to Community Kitchen. As mentioned earlier, we've had a bit of a rainy day. It sort of gets you into that feel that winter is just around the corner. This morning we're going to be talking, well, a little bit later, we're going to be talking to Dr. Richard James. He's a CSIRO researcher about wheat. And I think that it's one of those things, isn't it, that wheat is the staple food of half the world's population. So we'll be talking to them and finding out exactly what they've been doing, which I think is quite fantastic, and I want to share that with you. As usual, I go through the papers and read these interesting things, and there was a great article in Sunday's paper that, yes, you can feed a family of 5 for $150 a week. Evidently, there's a book written, $120 Food Challenge by Sandra Roberts, and we hope to talk to her a little bit later in the month. But just interesting to read this particular article. When you think of $150 a week for 5, it works out to $30 a week, which, when you look at what it costs you for your fruit and vegetables and your different pantry goods and your meat supplies and seafood, you know, you're really actually putting a lot of things, a lot of work, I think. And the review that they gave after this is the fact that one of the questions asked was it worth it? Saving money takes time. And I think that's one thing that you forget sometimes. It's not just a matter of grabbing something out of the fridge and plonking it on the grill and a few articles in the different things in the saucepan to cook, because the planning is intense and there's a lot more time spent on cooking. Be prepared to also to travel, to buy more, to visit more shops for your groceries, and you wonder sometimes whether or not taking into account your travelling time and your fuel and all those goodies. There's always been that debate, but it did show this particular lady who took on the challenge how she could slice 50% off her weekly grocery bill and still eat healthy and interesting food. The problem is, I think, when you're looking at a family, it's the planning and it takes time, and a lot of people just don't have that time. I think that's an interesting thing, and whether your children are going to enjoy the change, I think, because there's a lot of different foods in there, but worthwhile if you can grab that to have a look at it. And also I think it'll be interesting to talk to Sandra Reynolds down the track and see how she come up with doing this little challenge, which I think is interesting. Talking of books, I found this fantastic recipe book, and I think it's worthwhile sharing it with you. And I've mentioned earlier, you don't have to buy a book. You can always go to the library. We've got this fantastic new library in Caboolture now, the Hub, and it's worthwhile going in there. And if you actually put an order in, you can order different books, and there really are some fantastic books out there. Apparently books are going to be something of a past because everybody's using e-books. I'm a bit old-fashioned. I'm going to stick to my my paper books, I think, even though I'm probably chopping down trees and doing whatever. But I think it's worthwhile to have that in your hand and read. Anyway, Mr. Wilkinson's Favourite Vegetables. It's a beautiful book, and what I love about it is he gives you these 2 essential tips, and very rarely do you actually get anyone giving anything apart from their recipes. But this particular book is a journey, and he talks about the fact that years ago people selected their vegetable first because it was a very seasonal thing. And if he mentions here, if you think back to times gone by, the way to eat was to first find your vegetables, and then you found that what you added to it, put your protein. And he talks about that, and I wonder whether or not that's a good way to save some money too. We seem to think that we have to have everything on our plate, but once we start to eat seasonal foods, not only is it good for you, but at the same time you're able to use what's going in the growing in your veggie garden, and I think you become more creative. But I love these 2 essential tips, and reading from his book, I'll take this opportunity to give you 2 cooking tips that I really think you will appreciate and incorporate with your culinary repertoire, whether it's for use with this book or any others you may have. How frustrating do you find it when after a meal you have all the cooking dishes to clean up? And I think it is something that we have talked about before, because it is, you cook this great meal and you're left with this mess in the kitchen. And he says, personally, it annoys me. So simply clean as you go. Take time out of your cooking process to clean up after yourself, and try to use the same pot or pan again if you can. Otherwise, if you have children, never mind. Make them do the washing up. It's a good way for them to earn their keep. I don't know about that. Once upon a time it seems that we all had our jobs to do, but I don't know whether kids have to do that as much nowadays. I'm sure they're busy doing homeworks and goodies. And the second tip, of course, is this tip will help you immensely if you do it. Cooking should be fun, relaxed, and certainly not a chore. If you follow these simple steps when looking at a recipe, I promise you they will help you to be more organised and less stressed. So these are the tips. After you've chosen the dish and recipe you would like to cook, sit down, have a cup of tea or a glass of wine, and have a pen and notebook at the ready. Read the ingredients list and method thoroughly. Have a sip of your chosen beverage, then read the recipe again. Now write out the ingredients list with measurements of those you need to go and buy. He says, have another sip, whatever you're drinking. Now write out the method in your own words, not copying, but your own words. Then check that you have the correct ingredients and you know what you need to purchase. Close the book and do not open it again. Use your notes to cook from. This helps for a few reasons. First, when you write the method in your own words, you will understand it more clearly when following the steps. Second, you don't dirty your precious cookbook with cooking marks. And third, you're starting your own personal cookbook. You can adapt the recipe to your liking, and they are at hand when you need them in the future. Try this out. It helped me immensely and will help you too. Trust me, I'm from Yorkshire. So that is a fantastic book. It is such a beautiful personal book that this guy has created a chapter on each different vegetable seasonally, and how to grow it, how to look after it in the garden. And he's picked his particular vegetables that he likes, but there's just so many good ideas. And I really love his advice about the fact of reading the book and deciphering into something that you actually can understand, because that is one of the problems that you find, that a lot of books will write in their method, and you may not actually go like that, and who knows, you might have a cup measurement rather than scale, so you have to convert. And I think a lot of the times when you're trying a new recipe, it can be a little bit daunting, whereas if you've got it all worked out, relax, sit down and enjoy it, and it takes the whole stress out of doing that particular recipe. It's worthwhile. So go and have a look, go and see the new library, and ask them if they can get in that Mr. Wilkinson's Favourite Vegetables. And it's written by Mark Wilkinson, and it is an absolutely beautiful book produced by Murdoch Books. Worthwhile getting that out, because of course he was living in Yorkshire, but he's Melbourne based now, and he is passionate about food in season, farmers markets and local producers. I think it's just lovely. I reckon we might go to our sponsors, and then we'll come back and have a bit of a chat before our first guest. And welcome back to Community Kitchen. We have our guest online, Dr. Richard James, a CSIRO researcher. Good morning, how are you?
Good morning.
Excellent. Good to talk with you this morning. Good news for wheat farmers battling salinity. There's been a few changes in the wheat industry, I gather.
Yeah, well, this is work that has been going on for a while. The issue of salinity for farmers across Australia is a pressing one, and so our lab and indeed labs around Australia have been looking at finding ways to help farmers out in regard to this stress that their crops often face.
What percentage of area is affected by salinity?
Well, in Australia, they've estimated around about a third of the wheat growing area of Australia is impacted by some form of salinity. And that's often salinity that you can't see, what we call transient salinity. It's in the soil, the salts are there in the soil, and as the water's used up, the salts become concentrated and impact on the growth of the plants and in the final analysis on the yield of the wheat plants. That's a little bit different from the salinity that perhaps some of us are more familiar with, where you see the salts rising, the rising water table type of salinity, where the salts rise to the surface and you have salts on the surface and the plants dying and so forth. So there's both forms of salinity, but certainly around northern New South Wales and into Queensland and so forth, the bigger issue is what we call the transient salinity. It's the salt you can't see that's there, but impacting on growth and yield.
Has this thing something that's just come around in the last few years, or has it been an underlying factor for some time?
No, it's been an underlying factor for some time. They think that the salts have basically just blown in across the continent over many years and deposited itself into the soil profile. And just being an issue that's always been there, but just hard to get a handle on, hard to see. For example, you might find that a crop that might yield 3 tonnes to a hectare without salt might only yield 2.5 tonnes. So you've got a drop in yield, but it's just not an obvious thing to see. So it's an issue that's always been there. It's probably been brought more to the fore in recent years with the long period of drought, and therefore the salts becoming more and more concentrated in the soil with less and less water being available.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you think about how many farmers. I mean, I was just reading an article on the internet yesterday, and it said back in around the 2004 we had about 30,000 wheat farmers in Australia, and that's a lot of people.
Well, that's right, and they farm across a whole broad spectrum of areas in Australia. Some, of course, in very fertile areas where there are no salt or drought issues, and others that are hard up against it with salt and drought and pestilence and all sorts of things. And yields for wheat can range from 6 tonnes per hectare down to 1 tonne per hectare. And so the guys that are farming in those 1 or 1.5 tonne per hectare areas are the ones often that are facing the drought and salinity issues that we're trying to help them out with.
I was just also reading, I love the internet for this, you get so much information, but we sort of started off in about the 1700s when they first started to actually grow wheat, and there's been so many changes. And I can remember as a child we had the old sunshine harvester, and you'd have the bags on the side, and the doing up the ears and all this sort of stuff, and it was quite interesting where you had such a small amount of wheat coming off a property, and you'd be holding your seeds over for your next year. Does that still happen with farmers, that they actually they wheat breed themselves?
Well, farmers will hold their own sources of wheat. I don't think farmers breed their own wheat anymore. They're reliant on the breeding companies and to provide them with the latest wheat variety that's right up there in terms of quality characteristics and the latest suite of disease resistance factors built in. And increasingly now there's the need to factor in also other attributes in the wheat varieties that might help with issues such as salinity and drought. Now the farmers largely not able to do that, but certainly they keep their own seed and turn it over. But they're always looking out for the next batch of seed or the next variety of seed that ticks a few more boxes in terms of disease and quality and also drought and salinity issues.
They really do have a lot of risk, don't they, to manage the poor old farmers?
Well, they do, and our farmers do it extremely well generally. Our farmers are amongst the best in the world. They assess their paddocks in terms of what they can grow and what they can't grow, in terms of what's below the ground, but also they need to weigh that up with when to sow and in terms of rainfall predictions and what's in the soil at the time also. So they have to juggle a lot of things to try and eke out an existence and indeed profits on their land. For example, with the wheat that we've been able to produce that's more salt tolerant, the farmers that might would like to use something like that at the moment are typically growing barley because it has a reputation for being more salt tolerant. But if they now have the opportunity to grow a higher end product on their land, then they can start having another option to do that. They can grow the barley, or they can now have the option to put in a durum wheat, which will give them a much greater return at the farm gate. They're juggling a whole range of issues as they seek to maximise whatever they can get out of their land.
It's incredible, isn't it, when you think about the fact that that wheat is a staple food for half the world's population.
And that's the challenge, isn't it? Because the projections with increasing world population are in some ways scary, and certainly we need to be increasing the productivity of our land substantially to be able to cater for the projected population increase, and therefore something like the wheat that we've produced will hopefully be important in that. It'll mean that farmers will be able to use land that perhaps they haven't used in the past because it's been so marginal in terms of salinity and so forth. We and many other researchers need to be increasingly improving the productivity of our land by a number of means, and certainly one means is just producing wheat that can cope with a whole range of things in a better way, and just yield give a higher yield given sort of the drought and the water availability issues and the increasing salinity issues as well.
Incredible. I was just reading in your press release, it said the salt tolerance comes from a gene that stops the sodium getting to the leaves.
That's right. And
the gene was introduced into modern wheat from an ancestral cousin. This is incredible, isn't it? I'm not a very technical person, so my mind can't even imagine how someone would actually work this all out. So do you want to have a little talk to our listeners about that?
I could give you a bit of a sketch about how that works. Yeah, we often look for what we call genetic diversity in traits that might be helpful for improving yields of our wheats in and amongst the existing varieties of wheat that are grown in Australia, or perhaps even past varieties. There seems to be a bit of a limited gene pool there for accessing sort of what we call the novel traits, or the novel germplasm that will give us these traits. So increasingly we've found that we've needed to step further and further away and from existing cultivars and varieties and look for genetic diversity in what we call old varieties or land races, things that have been grown for hundreds of years, and certainly in the Persian area thousands of years. And then we also look at what availability of novel genes exist in related species and what we call progenitors of wheat, things that were joined together thousands of years ago to give us modern wheat. And it's there, interestingly enough, that there's still a lot of genetic diversity. It's just a matter of knowing what you need to find, knowing how to find it, and then once you've found it, embarking on a breeding program to cross over the genes of interest that carry these important traits like drought and salt tolerance, and then being able to track them in a breeding program and bring them through into modern varieties. So that's a bit of a sketch of how that's done. We use molecular technologies to do that now. We develop molecular markers, which are like the fingerprints for these genes, which we can then use to sort of track them in our breeding program. So there are certainly techniques available to us now that are helpful in developing new varieties with these new novel genes from wild and related species.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you talk about that, and we generally in food, and you're talking about even the apple industry. I notice now that people are sourcing the world to find those very, very old heirloom, I guess is a word that our listeners will identify with. Yeah. And it seems to be something that where heirloom vegetables, heirloom fruit and fruit trees are all. It's almost like a fashion, isn't it?
Well, I'm not sure what the impetus for the apple industry is. Maybe it's the uniqueness of those heirloom varieties, but there's probably something inherently interesting and good in finding the original types that were grown. But certainly in terms of research, we need to travel a good distance in terms of genetic diversity to find the things that we're after, and perhaps that's the same as people are sourcing the older varieties of apples and so forth as well.
And with your particular new wheat, have you got the farmers actually growing this now?
No, well, hopefully will happen in the next 2 to 4 or 5 years. What we produce was what we'd call an advanced breeding line. So we've crossed the genes that we found in the ancestral cousin of wheat into a modern wheat variety, and we back-crossed it a number of times, so it to all intents and purposes looks like a very modern wheat plant. The only difference being it has these novel genes for salt tolerance. Now, and basically what we did then was use that wheat to evaluate it in the field and see how it went against modern Australian wheats. But that doesn't actually make that particular wheat variety we've developed into a modern-day cultivar. What needs to happen now, and indeed what is happening, is that it's in the hands of wheat breeders in Australia, and they're incorporating into their breeding programs. And what they're going to do there is lock in not only the salt tolerance that comes from our breeding line, but combine it with the latest and the best in quality attributes, which are very important, and other things such as disease resistance and indeed in a high yielding background as well. So there's a bit of combining and development that still needs to take place before this wheat will find its way into farmers' paddocks. But it would probably be in the order of 3 to 5 years would be our guess.
Light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, it's a long process. We started this project about 10 years ago, and often with the discovery of new and interesting traits, it can be a 15 to 20 year process of developing the wheat, understanding the genes and how they work, and if there's any yield issues with them and so forth, which can often be the case, right through to the full-on breeding program. And once it's in the hands of the breeders, it needs to then be evaluated across the nation in specific trials. So even there's a reasonably lengthy process, but it's a good process that safeguards the product and hopefully safeguards the investment that any farmer might put into it.
And I guess more importantly, safeguards our food for the future.
Well, that's what it's all about, isn't it? The work that we do at CSIRO, and this is done in collaboration with some excellent researchers at the University of Adelaide. It's all about servicing and serving the farmers of our country and making sure that they have whatever advantage they can get from us to improve their lot on their land.
I think that's fantastic. Thank you very much for joining me this morning.
It's a pleasure.
Bye now.
Cheers.
And we've been talking with Dr. Richard James, as a researcher with the CSIRO. Incredible, isn't it, just how long it takes? But when you think about the fact that wheat being a staple food for half the world's population, we're looking at around 7 billion now, with the anticipated huge increase in the next few years, we really have to look about looking at these staple foods being something that's their supply is going to be secure, because it is one of the things that everyone talks about and has a little panic about is what food are we going to have in the future. It seems that wheat and rice seem to be a very good basis. So it's nice to be able to know that we've got these people developing things that will help us in our future production. I think we'll have to go to our sponsors, and we'll be back very shortly. And you're back with Community Kitchen. Just received this great little article. I was hoping I could talk to them on air, but we might do that next week to see how it's going. We've had the Master Chef. Now apparently we have Market Chef, and it's back for 2012. This is happening up at the Yamundi markets, and what's happening is students from all the colleges will learn about food selection, preparation, presentation, as will the market visitors who will enjoy watching the fun. The 2012 cook-off competitions at all the different colleges, and what happens apparently is the children will be given a theme for the day, and the culinary clashes will take place every Wednesday during terms 2 and 3, with 2 heats each day and a different theme each week. The competition will culminate with a grand final on 15th of August. ideal thing for the Yamundi markets, with such beautiful produce around there. And as one of the promoters is saying, we're renowned for our fabulous food and fresh produce here at Yamundi markets, and Market Chef celebrates that foodie passion, but also mentors up-and-coming chefs of the future, that nurturing and community involvement is also important. What a great thing to do. So if you're going up there, remember that they're doing these cook-offs. Starts tomorrow, actually. Market week, first week is the 18th of April, and the first cooking is at 9:15 till 10:15, and then 10:30 till 11:30, and the Good Shepherd is versus the Look Now training, and on the next heat it's the St Andrews Anglican versus the Burnside State High School. I think that sounds fun. A lot of people go for a drive, so if you're going up there to the Yamundi markets, remember that Market Chef 2012. And there's so many good kids cooking out there. Wish my children had been culinary chefs when they were at home. We would have had a few nights that we didn't have to worry about cooking dinner. And as much as you don't mind, isn't it a treat when you go out or when someone cooks a meal for you? I think it is just such a beautiful thing. And of course, you do expect a bit of spoiling, so of course that happens. So remembering, guys, that we will chase up the lady Sandra Reynolds, who can feed her family for $120 a week, which I think is just amazing. And don't forget, if you go into the library, ask them about Mr. Wilkinson's Favourite Vegetable Cookbook by Matt Wilkinson. Even if you just want to sit and read it, it is just a beautiful book. And many thanks to Dr. Richard James from the CSIRO research lab there, talking to us this morning. I think it is one of those things that we do have a concern about, is our food supply for the future. And of course, with salinity affecting a third of our wheat growing area, it is a bit scary, isn't it? And interesting to think that the salt is blowing in. When you think of our lakes and goodies like that, I imagine Lake Eyre would be dispersing a lot of salt across our production area. It's nice to follow up these people, but I must say I don't think I could have ever been a researcher. 10 years they've been working at it so far, and now they've got another 2 or 4 years before it actually hits out into the field, so it is a slow process. So let's hope we hear some more about that in the future. That's all from me today. Thank you, Harriet, for panelling, and I'm sure that everybody's been very busy listening to 101.5 with all the election results coming up. We've only got a couple of more weeks, I think, before, maybe not even a couple of weeks. There's probably a lot of anxious people out there. So continue tuning in, guys, because it is our community and we like to know what's going on. Thanks for listening, and we'll join you next week.